Okay, let's talk a little bit about characterization. Mostly, I want to talk about the list poem in this video. But I think list poems are so great for characterizing a person, a scene, a place, whatever. So I gave out some sample list poems. I want to start with Things My Father Gave Me, which I Never Asked For by Ayodele Heath. You can look at the video of him performing this on YouTube. It's really wonderful. It's a poem, my go-to poem when I'm talking about our teaching list poems, because it's just so clearly a list. It's indicated by the title, Things My Father Gave Me. Here's a list, right? And the way it's written as a kind of prose poem. Like you would expect, the way when you hear it performed, you would expect this list to contain 50 items, and it only contains 6. So here we are. It starts, of course, life, a home plate, a backyard with a pitching mound. And so he starts from the beginning to the end. He ends with how to love and how to always come home. He ends with the image of a funeral. So it's kind of tracking him through his life. In the middle, we get to how to treat a woman, how to treat a girl, how to let that girl be a woman, that kind of thing. So it tracks him through his life. It's organized kind of chronologically, and you get characterization from it. You learn about the speaker, you learn about the father, and you learn about the home. You learn what kind of values were in the home, that there was a pitching mound, that there were that they trapped rabbits, that there was a high top fade, so that gives you a little time reference, time setting. Funk and Wagnall's encyclopedias too gives you time setting, but it also characterizes the home. What kind of home was this? What kind of father was this? What kind of son or character was the speaker? How to buy a suit. Who learns how to buy a suit? I didn't even know that was a thing you could teach. But okay, it makes sense to me now. I mean, all of these things are little moments of characterization, even though it's just a word or phrase. There's nothing else behind it. Dream books are in there. So a couple of other things I want to point out about this poem is that you get moments of conflict. This seems like a really idyllic poem. How to drive a high top fade, how to ask out a lady, how to let her be a woman, how to use a level, how to keep your cool, when to be cool. And it has these little funny moments in it, but it has little moments of conflict in there too. How to speak when white people are present, how to talk when white folks ain't. So we know there's this white-black conflict in there. And then at the end, how to admit when you're wrong, how to apologize before the funeral. And this is something, that can really lend itself to interpretation. Who are we talking about? Who was the father at odds with? Was the father and son at odds with each other? Possibly. Doesn't seem to be. It seems like the father was modeling a behavior that needed to be modeled with someone else before the funeral. But it also kind of hints at the father's either death or impending death. So it's a rich little moment there. And then also I want to point out in that 6th stanza how Ayodele Heath controls pacing. The phrases get shorter at one point, which speeds the pacing up. It builds energy. So he says, how to shake a man's hand, how to look him in the eye, a thirst to learn, a bookcase. And then you get these phrases where either it's 2 syllables or the phrase's emphasis is on 2 syllables. So a bookcase, would not be emphasized, but bookcase, even though case is not really emphasized, but it can sound like a 2-syllable phrase is what I'm saying. So listen to this. A thirst to learn, a bookcase, muscadines, nights to dream books, reasons to cry, dark skin, strong teeth, full lips, blood. Like all that right there, the easing the pacing up with the 3-syllable phrases that can sound like two, well, that have two stressed syllables in them, or like the major phrases stressed and unstressed. And then you get the actual 2-syllable phrases: dark skin, strong teeth, full lips. Like, that is him controlling pacing. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but this is my go-to when I'm teaching Liszt poems always. I love that poem, and it's a great writing prompt in terms of, okay, well, what are things that my father taught me? What are things that my mother taught me? Those are completely different poems. What are things that my grandfather taught me? What are things that my brother, my lover, the person that I last broke up with, what are things that they taught me? Those are all writing prompts that can come from this poem, and you can emulate this style of the writing by just keeping it to words or phrases: life, a home plate, time, a huffy bike. Even how that mirrors itself, the parallelism of that. How to crack pecans, because that's how you're going to say pecans in a place where they trap rabbits. They're not pecans. That's ridiculous. I want to also look at Danez Smith's alternate names for black boys. Again, the title indicates the list is coming. Alternate names for black boys. The thing that I find helpful for learning Liszt poems with this poem is how some of the phrases tie directly together. So we have this motif running throughout. The motif is the idea or phrase or object or image, symbol, whatever, that recurs throughout a piece. And not to spend too much time on motif, but motif is it can be so wonderful if you use it right, because the meaning of the phrase will change as you go along in the piece. Whether it's music or country music does this all the time. They go back to the chorus, and now the chorus means something different because the first verse, the kid was a kid. The second verse, it was their first relationship. And then the third verse, they're dying, or maybe that's in the hook. The fourth verse, they're old, and then they're dying, or whatever. And so they repeat that phrase, and that phrase means something different when you get to the end and they're dying. Country music does it a lot. Musicals do it a lot. Of course, literature, novels, poetry does it a lot. And if you've seen the musical Hamilton, like the phrase, "I'm not throwing away my shot," or what is Aaron Burr's phrase? What do you stand for? Like the way that repeats and means something different throughout. So motif is wonderful. But we have here, we have here a motif of smoke and fire burning, right? The poem starts with smoke above the burning bush. That item in the list connects with number 4, coal awaiting spark and wind, which connects with number 6, oil, burning oil, heavy starlight. Number 9, Phoenix who forgets to unash. Come on, unash. Come on, take the noun, make it a verb, and then negate the verb. Yes, unash. I love that. 12, what once passed for kindling. 13, fireworks at dawn. And so those fire, burning, smoke images recur. And if you start with that first one, which I think is so poignant, like these alternate names for black boys, is not the bush that's being burned, is not the fire that's burning the bush or not burning the bush, right? Thinking about the biblical references, the oil, the burning bush, the oil that never burned out with the 7 ladies and something or another. I know my Bible. I went to Bible school. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know it, but I went to Bible school. And then the burning bush with Moses, and where he talked to God, heard the things, and let my people go. So this here is not the bush, it's not the fire, which is normally the only things we think about: the bush, the fire, the person speaking, God, the person being spoken to, Moses, right? And maybe the desert, you think about the desert. But because the bush in the Bible, maybe because the bush in the Bible does not burn, you don't think about there being smoke. So Danez throws the smoke in there. The thing that you don't think about being there may not have been there, may have been there, depends on your story. I don't think it's in the Bible. Y'all go to church and find out. So the smoke above the burning bush brings in, like, think about bringing something into existence that wasn't really a part of the narrative before, was an ignored part of the narrative. The smoke above the burning bush. Oh, that's so wonderful. And then that being the first item in the list sets the precedent for the rest of the images. We also have paired together, remember, so what's partly happening is that he has some cohesive thoughts that he strategically breaks and separates. Another example of this is item 8 and 10. We have gone, then we have going, going, gone. Numbers 3 and 11, we have first son of soil and gods of shovels and black veils. So that first son of soil is, again, another biblical allusion where you read that and you think of Adam, but you know this is about death. And so we're not talking about the first son, or we can partly be talking about the first son, the first human, Adam, the first man, but we are also talking about the first son inheriting the soil, the death, the funeral, that kind of thing. Then we have number 5 and 7. Guilty until proven dead, monster until proven ghost. So the parallelism of the phrase connects it, and also the idea behind the phrase. And then numbers 1 and 11, smoke above the burning bush, gods of is that what I meant to say? I think what I meant to say was number 1 and 12, smoke above the burning bush, what's past for kindling, those connect. So, I mean, this is a really beautiful poem. It characterizes not a person or people or family, but a group of people and a problem surrounding that group. So the group of people being murdered black boys, and the problem surrounding how and why they're murdered, right? This characterizes a situation, which I think is a really unique way to approach the list poem. Now, since we're talking about characterization, I need to pause and say part of the reason, other than like this chair being comfortable, that I'm in this room today is because this room itself characterizes. Normally I'm against some kind of blank background. And when I write fiction, and sometimes when I write poetry, but mostly when I write fiction, I have my rooms clean like the government is coming to visit. Like everything, nothing's on the dressers, nothing's on the countertops, smells like Pine Sol. Like that's how I like to build my rooms, or at least I used to. But back in the day, one of my professors was like, "Why would you do that?" I'm trying to not use an ableist word. I was gonna say handicap, but I'm trying to be better about that. It takes away the materials you need as a writer, right? To clean the room up takes away the materials you need as a writer to characterize your characters, and also put objects in the room that can be used later. Like, I think it was Hemingway who said, if you have a gun in a scene, that gun better go off by the end of the play. So the things you put in the room, so if I'm writing my mom or somebody like my mom, this is her sewing room, I cannot write her room. I can write it organized, but I definitely can't write it clean of all things, right? You see all her little jewelry and sewing and jewelry and paper organization and all this. She loves projects. So her room has to have thread up against the wall. It only makes sense. It has to have this stuff. Every kind of plier that has ever been invented, because one won't do, right? You need 30 or so. And that is a great way to characterize any person, any situation, anything. So I just wanted to point this out by being in this room, which helped me remember, and it also served as an example. The next one I want to talk about, this poem has confounded me for a while. Just the genius of it. How in the world can I write this poem? I hope one of you guys can pull this off, write an after poem for Anne Carson. This poem is called Appendix C, clearing up the question of Stesichorus Stesachorus's blinding by Helen. So the situation with Stesachorus in ancient wherever, he was a bard, poet, poet slash songwriter slash performer, he had the slashes going on. And he told a story about Helen that didn't depict her favorably. Helen magically blinds him until he gives his palinode, his retraction poem, his retraction song that says, "Oh no, she's cool," and then he gets his sight back. So I'm gonna go through this poem a little bit quicker. A little bit slower. The opposite. We deal with oppositions here, so I'm gonna blame that on the poem. And okay, so I'm going to go through this poem a little bit slower so that we can take our time with it and also think about the construction, think about what's being said. I know this poem can be difficult, but I think it's wonderful. So, number one, either Stesachoros was a blind man or he was not. So she lets you know we're setting up conditionals here. Either this or that. If this, either this or that. If this, either this or that. This kind of logical philosophical problem that we're going through in order to solve the question, was he blind or not? The first question in the story. Was he blind or not? The first item in the poem. Number two, if Stesachoros was blind, a blind man, either his blindness was temporary condition or it was permanent, right? Now we're going to choose the first item in the either or clause, right? From number 1 on down to number 9. We're choosing the first item. Either Stesachoros was a blind man or he was not. If he was a blind man, either his blindness was temporary condition or it was permanent. If it was temporary, so we're choosing that first item. If it was a temporary condition, this condition either had a contingent clause or it had none. That contingent clause, like, what's the cause? Did Helen blind him? If so, why? Number 4, if this condition had a contingent clause, that cause was Helen. Or, so the either's in the number 3 and number 4, and a few more of these, number 5, number 6, the either's are erased, but they are still there. We can still read them. It's like the implied you in sentences that just start with the verb, run to the store. The implied subject is you, and here we have the implied either. If this condition had a contingent clause, that clause was Helen, or the cause was not Helen. If the cause was Helen, Helen had her reasons, or she had none. So we're calling Helen into question here. If Helen had her reasons, the reasons rose out of some remark by Stesachoros that Stesachoros made, or they did not. If Helen's reasons rose out of some remark by Stesachoros, so she, Anna Carson, is telling the story while calling it into question, right? This is part of the reason I think this poem is so genius. She tells the story while calling it into question. So the story is Stesachoros was blind. It was a temporary condition. The condition had a clause that was Helen. Helen had her reasons. Her reasons rose out of some remark that Stesachoros made, or a poem or book that he wrote about her, saying that she was the cause of the fall of Troy, and that if it weren't for her, all these lives would still be around. These empires and kingdoms would still be around anyway. So she's telling the story, but then she calls it into question at the end. We know that the cause was Helen and that Helen had her reasons, but she calls it into question, or she had no reasons. 6, if Helen had her reasons rose out of some remark Stesachoros made, or they didn't, but we know they did, right? If Helen's reasons arose out of some remark Stesachoros made, either it was a strong remark about Helen's sexual misconduct, not to say its unsavory aftermath, the fall of Troy. Tell me what the author believes, or it was not. Come on now. Tell me what the author believes. Tell me what Stesachoros believes. Tell me what Helen believes. We get it. Just by the structure of the sentences and the way they follow this conditional format, if this, either, or if this, either this or this, right? Then she is characterizing everybody in the scene just by the structure of the sentences. If it was a strong remark about Helen's sexual misconduct, not to say its unsavory aftermath, the fall of Troy. Ooh, messy. He was so messy. Either this remark was a lie or it was not. Here's where things reverse. Number 9. If it was not a lie, which is to say if it was true, which is to say we are choosing the second item in that conditional phrasing. Before we were choosing the first item, now we're choosing the second item. See? Or it was not. If it was not, that item drops straight down. It's the second item. This is the first time it happens. But watch. If it was not a lie, and it helps me to read it this way. If it was true, if the remark was true, either we are now in reverse and by continuing to reason in this way are likely to arrive back at the beginning of the question of the blinding of Stesichorus, or we are not. So she replicates this, like she says we're now in reverse, right? And she's pulling from the second part of the conditional phrase, no longer the first. So she kind of reverses the way she's working too. She also puts this phrasing as a negative, which, like I kind of indicated before, negatives can be hard to understand. The positive is easier to understand. So I can tell my significant other, I don't not want you to clean the floor. And they'll be like, wait, so what do you want me to do? I don't not want you to clean the floor. So you want me to clean the floor? Yes, I want you to clean the floor. Why don't you understand me? Because this is a negation, right? So she starts number 9. She says, if it was not a lie, right? Then she negates it again. Either we are now in reverse. Like she throws it backwards again. And by continuing this way, we're likely to arrive at the beginning of the question, which is number 1. Was Stesichorus a blind man or not? Was he at some point blind? Is the question, right? We'll arrive back there, or we are not in reverse and we won't arrive back there. If we are now in reverse, now she chooses the first item here. If we are now in reverse and by continuing to reason in this way are likely to arrive back at the beginning of the question of the blinding of Stesichorus, either we will go along without incident or we will meet Stesichorus on our way back. Now she chooses the second item again. So she kind of switched it right there. Now she chooses the second item for number 11. If we meet Stesichorus on our way back, either we will keep quiet or we will look him in the eye and ask him what he thinks of Helen. Okay, so remember, the reason this is a question is because the whole, Stesichorus and other bards at the time called Helen's character into question through their writing. Helen blinds Stesichorus as punishment magically. Then he basically prints a retraction that says, no, Helen's my girl. What are we talking about? Helen's the best thing in the world. And then gets his sight back. So here, if the author's intent is to figure out what is true, we know that Stesichorus lied at least once. He either lied in the beginning by calling Helen's character into question, or he lied at the end by saying, no, she's cool, she's good, she's all that. So here we get 11. If we meet Stesichorus on our way back, either we will keep quiet or we'll look him in the eye and ask him, what do you think of Helen? What is it for real? Because you've said 2 things. 12. If we look Stesichorus in the eye, chose the second item, and ask him what he thinks of Helen, either he will tell the truth or he will lie. So at this point, before this point, one of his phrases was true and one of it was a lie already. The original statement about Helen or the corrective statement, the palinode, right? Now we're asking him for something. And he's either going to tell the truth or a lie, which is one of the 2 things that he did before. 13. If Stesichorus lies, either if Stesichorus gives us the palinode too, right? Double palinode. If he lies, either, because we're assuming that the first statement about Helen was true. If Stesichorus lies, either we will know at once that he's lying, or we will be fooled because now we are in reverse and the whole landscape looks inside out. So she comes back to that reversal. The palinode itself is a reversal. Like, oh no, I didn't say that. What I was really saying was I love Helen. Like, that's a reversal. We can call it a motif too, the way she plays with reversals and negations. Either this or this binary thing. If we are fooled, because she's choosing the second item now. If we are fooled because now that we are in reverse, the whole landscape looks inside out. Either we will find that we do not have a single penny on us, or we will call Helen and tell her the good news. This indicates time period. What is the time period of the speaker? The speaker needs some pennies. Pennies exist during the time period of the speaker and the setting of the rest of the poem. And we can call Helen and tell her the good news. We have this plural, singular plural, speaker, first person singular plural, we. 15, if we call Helen up, either she will sit with her glass of vermouth and let it ring, because we're talking about phone calls, not visiting calls. So that gives us a time indicator too. Like this. Or if she doesn't let it ring, or she will answer. If she answers, either we will say, as they say, leave well enough alone. Either we will, as they say, leave well enough alone, or we will put Stesichorus on. And that's not put him on like, yeah, your girl, holla at her. It's put him on the phone. I had to write that down to remind myself to say that. Because this is a white woman writing this poem. This is a woman who seems to be white and possibly identifies as white. I don't know her business like that. Ann Carson. Number 17, if we put Stesichorus on, either he will contend that he now sees more clearly than ever before the truth about her horn, or he will admit he's a liar. Now, this number 17 to me can indicate two things. That one, Stesichorus has not voiced his palinode yet and said, oh no, she's cool for real. Or it could say, so in that case, 17 would be the palinode itself, the reversal, the retraction. Or we can see this as like reinforcing a palinode already made. So is he blind right now or not? Well, if the initial question is, was he a blind man or was he not? Then I assume that here, he is not a blind man. He's already said the palinode. He's already gotten right with Helen and he can see, right? So number 17, if we put Stesichorus on, he will either contend that he now sees more clearly than ever before the truth. So we have that sight functioning in a physical way and also a like, no, I see your character better about her whoring. Or he will admit he is a liar. He lied at some point. Either the original statement or the retraction. 18, if Stesichorus admits he's a liar, either we will melt into the crowd, or we will stay to see how Helen reacts. Oh, she's so messy. She's so messy. She's like, oh, let me see what Helen says. Trying to listen on the phone. 19, if we stay to see how Helen reacts, either we will find ourselves pleasantly surprised by her dialectical abilities, or, remember that we're taking the second part of the phrase here, or we will be taken downtown by the police for questioning. Another time indicator. 20, if we're taken downtown by the police for questioning, either we will be expected as eyewitnesses to clear up once and for all, the question of whether Stesichorus was a blind man or not, because that's the question. 20, if Stesichorus was a blind man, either we will lie, or if not, not. Okay, so number 20, the or not carries two phrases. If we're taken downtown by the police for questioning, either we will be expected to clear up for once in a while, once and for all, whether he was a blind man, or we will not be expected to clear up once and for all whether he was a blind man. The or can function that way. Or it can function, if we're taken downtown for police questioning, either we will be expected to clear up once and for all the question of whether Stesichorus was a blind man or not. Right? The or can connect to was a blind man or not, right? Or it can connect to the larger phrase, the way these or nots have been connecting with the larger phrase. Either will be asked by the police to clear it up, or we will not be asked by the police to clear it up. Then the last phrase, if Stesichorus was a blind man, either we will lie, or if not, right? Now we have two negatives, right? If Stesichorus was a blind man, either we will lie, or if he was not a blind man, we will not lie. So we'll tell the truth if he was never blinded. We'll lie if he had been blinded. Now, the reason I say this poem is good for characterization, first of all, I just think the construction is amazing, but it's good for characterization because it's telling us how the author, is fictionalizing Helen here. To say that she is the kind of woman that will have you taken downtown by the police if you're talking bad about her to her face or behind her back. And you will feel the need to lie as well, just like Stesichorus did. So it characterizes you being the speaker, we, us, the collective. It characterizes Stesichorus and how he made his decisions, characterizes Helen, and then it also gives us, it builds setting through the list as we go down. Helen had to be protective of her reputation here. She didn't want to encounter disrepute, be blamed for all of the lives lost, be blamed for the fall of Troy, all of those things. And then very briefly, I want to talk about Death is Something Entirely Else by Joy Katz. All of these poems can be found online. It's, for me, I want to point out this poem because it is a hybrid list poem. I think this is something cool to do. So the Department of Trance, Department of Dream Levitation, Department of White Fathom, Department of Winding, all of that is the list poem part. And then we have the narrative part. Sometimes my son orders me to lie down. I like when he orders me to lie down. Sometimes my son orders me lie down. I like when he orders me lie down. Close your eyes. He covers me with, then sings. I like best the smallest sounds he makes. Then I am slipping away as if he were a distant station. My child says, "You sleep," and covers my face with blankness. I can't speak or even blink, or the page laid over my face will fall. And that story sounds like a mother playing with her child, right? It sounds like, that you sleep, right? It's not an adult construction. It's a child-like construction. It sounds like he's covering her with papers. It sounds like he's doing something where he's in charge and she has to be still. And then you add in Department of Paper Laid Gentry, Department of Sound Sheets of Paper, Department of This Won't Sting, Department of Violet Static, Department of Satellite, Department of Infinitely Flexible Web, Department of Tapping the Vein, Department of Eyelash. All of that brings more seriousness and grounding to the poem, to a poem that otherwise could be seen as not as serious, right? I like best when I'm most like dead and being with him then. I must explain to my child that sleep is not the same as dead, so that he may not be afraid of. So I can lie and listen, not holding, not carrying, not working. Faint sound of him, I am gone. His song is the door back into the room. I am composed of the notes. It sounds like a relationship with a child, like you have to explain death to him. Like there is stillness in this scene. And then the list portion adds the seriousness to it. Department of clear tape and whorls and double helixes on the wall. Department of you won't feel a thing. Department of pinprick. Department of veils and chimes, of lungs afloat in ether. Department of spider vein. Department of notes stuck from thin glasses successively struck from thin glasses successfully at random. Department of borderlessness. Department of fingertips lightly on eyelids. Department of becalmed. So you have, I think the pairing of these moments, I'm going to speak for Joy Katz here. I don't know this, but I think our pairing these two moments helped her push the narrative portion of the poem into a quieter place, into that, so that he won't be afraid of death place. And the list portion of the poem, to me, adds the somberness, adds the seriousness, adds, I mean, just through the hospital language, through the trance, the otherworldly language, levitation, to this feeling that the spirit is about to leave the body. Very cool hybrid poem, questioning what it means to feel mortal. Yeah. And I think just nods very slightly to Because I Could Not Stop for Death, He Kindly Stopped for Me, Emily Dickinson, in reimagining what death, or this something entirely else, because death is something entirely else to her here. The reimagining how we can see it as a carriage going by to pick you up, or as a department of this, department of that. So the pairing, the paradoxical pairing of the department of blah, 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 the department of trance, department of dream levitation, department of white fathom. For me, those are really strong moments because they don't fit, because they are paradoxical. Department seems very cut and dry, capitalist, business, whatever. And then we have something like trance, which seems ethereal. So that's what I have to say about list poems. I hope this was helpful and gives you a way to see these poems in a different way, and also engage your poems in interesting ways that breathe potential. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.